Hello and welcome to Plant-Based Playthroughs. Today we'll be going over the 3 lessons of wisdom from Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. To start, I will go over what the 3 are. I will just tell you what they are, and then I will get into the details of what it means and how it relates to real life. So here we go. The 3 lessons of wisdom from Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Number 1. The forces of social embarrassment are stronger than most people's own wills. Number 2. Nature is odd, intention is even. Number 3. The search for or attempt to become God will instead turn the searcher into a monster. Okay, so let's get into it. Number 1. The forces of social embarrassment are stronger than most people's own wills. So, when I talk about this, how I noticed this was when I started to get to the end of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands story mode, I was noticing Tiny Tina does a lot of things just based on being embarrassed as the bunker master or the DM of the campaign. She makes up a lot of things, and she will amend things, or she will pretend things were a certain way just based on like how embarrassed she is. Like the way she was written is that she won't admit to a lot of things. She won't admit to mistakes or doing things wrong, or just like she's trying to be perfect all the time. Like she wants her game to be perfect. She wants her story and her everything to be perfect. And it's written in that she's always trying to get around her mistakes by just pretending she didn't make them. And she's always embarrassed, and she's always dealing with her embarrassment by ignoring it or trying to roll with it and pretend that she didn't make a mistake when she did, etc., etc., etc. You can see this all the way from just like the cheese puff that she dropped. She turns into a quest, and she makes up like a whole little dungeon area for it and everything. And you see this more throughout the rest of the game too, even as you get closer to the end, where she'll make up bosses or she'll make up enemies. Even when you get to like, there's the underwater fight. I don't know if it's like underwater. It's against there's that big like octopus boss kind of guy. Before that, she had planned you were gonna meet with this like mermaid woman or this like siren woman, and but the other guys just wanted to fight, and she got mad and she just rolled with it and made a boss, and she does stuff like that all the time. But you know what? This kind of thing actually does happen in real life a lot. People get really embarrassed a lot, and people will, even if it's not a crime, even if what they're doing, what they did isn't a crime, even if the mistake they made wasn't like immoral or unethical or wasn't a crime or anything, people actually get this way. People actually get so embarrassed about just normal things that they don't need to be embarrassed about, rather than just admitting the truth. And you see like people will develop big stories around this concept of just people being embarrassed and not admitting to what they're embarrassed about. You see it in like movies and TV shows. Sometimes you see it for a more dramatic effect, and sometimes you see it more like in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, where it's more for a comedic effect. But this is because people have observed this happening for real, and people really do get really embarrassed like this, or they want to fit into the tribe, or they want to be so perfectly part of the tribe, and they want that that recognition. It gets to the point where people can't even admit to little mistakes sometimes for some people, and it all comes down to this idea that social embarrassment, or these tribe interactions, are actually forces. They're like chemistry forces inside of us, like a product of physics, and they're actually stronger than people's own willpower most of the time, because people can't just will themselves to admit that they did something wrong or that they made a mistake and then just be like, yeah, I did something wrong, I made a mistake, and oops, my bad, thanks for pointing it out or something. Instead of that, a lot of people will actually just be like, no, 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 I didn't make a mistake, I did that on purpose, I totally did that on purpose. And then it just leads them further down the rabbit hole. And so the lesson of wisdom here is that the forces of social embarrassment are actually stronger than most people's own wills. And if we could actually learn from this, more than just recognizing that it is something, more than just recognizing that this exists, we can, upon recognizing that this exists, we can actually deal with it. We can encounter it, and we can say, I'm not going to let this overpower me. I'm not going to let my embarrassment overpower me. I'm going to admit that I made a mistake, and it's just a silly little mistake. And even if I have really shitty friends or a really shitty tribe that's going to try to, peer pressure me over it and make fun of me over it, which would be a really shitty thing to do, and I should probably get new friends instead of putting up with those people, I'm going to admit that I made a mistake, and I'm just going to fix it or do something better. Or maybe I will roll with it. Maybe I'll admit I made a mistake. Okay, yeah, I messed up. It happens. I'm not perfect. Nobody is. But, it'll be fun to roll with it anyway. But the wisdom here, though, is just to notice how powerful social forces can be over our own willpower. So, wisdom lesson number 2 is that nature is odd and intention is even. Well, this whole game is based on the whole story, and a lot of things in this game are based on the tabletopness of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and stuff like that. You're constantly rolling dice and finding lucky dice, and it's a looter shooter, so it's built on top of that pretty well, that randomness of rolling for stuff, chance-based things. And when I was playing it, I was thinking, just because they were talking about the odds and stuff, and they were talking about making things even, and the main villain is trying to even though he's not real, he's still trying to even the playing field. And that got me thinking, you don't really see, sometimes you do see symmetry in nature, but there's no evening of anything. Nothing is evened out in nature. Things only get evened out, or you could even say things only even get made fair through intention. Otherwise, nature is odd, and random things don't usually make things symmetrical. So the interesting thing here is that if you leave things alone and leave it to be natural, things are odd. You have 3s, 6s, 9s. The things don't always balance correctly. But upon conscious thinking, when you become aware and you start to notice things, you start to notice, then it starts to emerge that things don't line up or match up or aren't symmetrical, aren't even, and then a lot of times that creates a feeling of like oddness or discomfort in people, because people are always trying to get even, or level the playing field. And honestly, this concept of fairness only really exists in intelligence. Nature in the universe isn't really fair. And if you think about it in the first place, fairness is only something that emerges when you have feelings and observations, and you can see the results of things like pain and joy. Without things like pain and joy, without like emotions and sensations, the idea of fairness doesn't even really matter. The concept of fairness only appears when you can experience something, when you can remember something. So you get this weird observation of wisdom. You get this weird lesson that things are odd naturally, and then only intention is really symmetrical or even, and it only gets that way through like effort and over time. So, lesson of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands number 3 is: the search for or attempt to acquire ultimate powers often rather turns the searcher into a monster. Trying to become God makes many a monster instead. So basically, those who try to become God will instead become a monster. Does this mean God is a monster? Well, technically, yes. And technically, no. Well, first of all, you see this in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. You see this because pretty much a lot of the bad guys were trying to gain some kind of ultimate magic or power or strength when they turned into a monster. But this, I really realized this. This idea really sparked in me when I was in one of the last dungeons, in one of the last areas, and I was destroying these like dragon eggs or wyvern eggs or something, and I was like, wow, this is a really mean mission. I kind of like dragons and wyverns. I don't want to destroy all their eggs. And this guy was like, okay, you just have to collect this stuff and do this stuff, and then I'll make something up. And he's like, haha, I'm gonna become like the most powerful, and I'm gonna have this crazy fire spell. And he was doing all these things, and he was like, I'm about to become the most powerful fire user ever. And then he turns into a monster. And I was like, that happens a lot. That really happens a lot, like all the time. And I was thinking about it. I was like, that happens like in like all the Borderlands. There's always someone who's trying to like become a god, and they turn into a monster. And that's like, actually, that happens like a lot in a lot of things. And then I was like, so wait, people who try to become God pretty much always turn into monsters. And I was thinking, like, there are people who are even like that in real life. They're like conquerors and scientists and like psychologists who've tried to gain like ultimate power or ultimate intelligence or ultimate knowledge or something, and then they end up doing some really evil, terrible things, some inhumane experiments or something, and they think like, oh well, the upsides are better than the downsides or whatever. And I was just like, do you know what? Trying to become God really turns people into a monster. And well, if all the religions are right about God, if all the different religions about different gods are right, most forms of God are like omniscient or all powerful or all being, and they're in everything. If God is everything, then God is a monster, technically. So the only way to become God is also to become a monster. So the only people who can become God are those who are willing to become a monster. And I think a lot of people, they don't even think about that when they, like, nobody who calls themselves a god or wants to become a god or wants that kind of ultimate power, nobody really talks about that part of it. or even acknowledges that part of it. They think like, oh, if I just get a lot of money or a lot of power, or if I just do this or get this, I get this technology or learn this thing, or if I can conquer this place and have all these people under my control, then I'm basically a god at that point. But God, if God is in everything, then God is a monster. God is in monsters as well. That means monster. That means whoever tries to become God will become a monster, because God is a monster to some degree. That's part of like omnipotence. So that was my 3 lessons of wisdom from Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I have this written down. I didn't really follow the script as well as I'd like to. I'm a little under the weather right now, so if I sound a little off, I am a little off right now. But hopefully I was able to push through it well enough and bring you some cool, interesting wisdom from Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Maybe you're thinking this would be a little funnier because it was Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and if you were expecting something a little funnier, I'm sorry. But this is par for the course. If you've seen my other wisdom videos, I was just focusing on the wisdom that I found in the game. And if you did like it and you thought that was interesting, entertaining, or whatever, stay tuned for the next one. And if you haven't seen the other ones, go watch them.